And that thing too means it's Friday and it's Van Connor with his Freeview film recommendations. 3 from Van, 3 from me, and of course Van Connor, one of the country's leading film critics, co-host of the B Off-Screen podcast, which drops later on today, a bumper edition, I understand. And Van joins us now with 3 films FYC. Good morning, Van. How's your week been, mate? You seen any good films?
I can't complain, Mr. Ross. You know, I got to see The Iron Claw this week, and it absolutely delivered on all the potential I had for what I was hoping was going to be one of the great wrestling movies.
Did you like the Mickey Rourke film, The Wrestler? Because there was a lot of Oscar buzz around at the time. And I think it's an underrated gem, that, I think.
Yeah, I was a big fan. I love that one. That was Aronofsky's one. That was really good. I think that and Iron Claw, they're in a league entirely of their own. It's a category of 2, I think, if I'm being honest.
Although I do think people overlook, I mean, when Rocky hit big, Sly Stallone had different aspirations to it, and he made a film called Paradise Alley, I don't know if you've ever seen, which is basically a wrestling film. His brother in it, Sly Stallone's more of a hustler, is this 11-foot tall behemoth. It's set in the 1920s in America. Really interesting film. Didn't make any money, so he went into Rambo.
Oh my God. You know, the weird thing, I think when I think of wrestling movies, I think of the late 80s, early 90s, like Hulk Hogan tried to be the poster boy for it. He went up things like Mr. Nanny and Santa with muscles and things like that. Rather than the early 2000s heyday, which I enjoy more, when the WWE got into things like 16 rounds. Like that's my kind of wrestling.
And also, of course, They Live featuring Rowdy Roddy Piper, which we mentioned only recently.
It's stapled the genre, yeah.
And let's go on now to your first recommendation for it's a cracking British gangster film, this one.
Yeah, so tonight, 5-star, 9 p.m. And I can only imagine the reason we've got this as a Friday night movie is because, you know, we've got Argyle in cinemas at the moment, which is the latest movie from director Matthew Vaughn. This is his very, very first movie, Layer Cake, from 2004. He had basically had his name attached to 2/3 other films before this. He was basically Guy Ritchie's producer. He'd been the producer on Lock, Stock, Snatch, and I think Mean Machine as well, which Guy Ritchie didn't direct, but again, had Matthew Vaughn's name on it. And he went into directing with this one, this was the film that was kind of newly released when Daniel Craig got announced as Bond. So all of the mock promo images, all of the sort of highlight reels that they used in news footage and things like that came from Layer Cake. And it kind of took away from, was actually a really nifty little film in its own right, a British gangster film that was very of its time. It was about that crossover threshold in which we had the early 2000s made sort of crossover into designer drugs in the tabloids, really. And you have a character played by Daniel Craig who is the dealer of said designer drugs and how he attempts to navigate his way through the criminal underworld. You've got a great supporting cast in there as well. And they're not really a name cast. I mean, it made kind of a supporting star out of Sienna Miller.
And Jamie Foreman's fantastic in this film, isn't he? I think he's called the Duke.
Yes, he's actually got the showiest part. And yet again, even in that era, just wasn't a household name. He was pretty much that guy. And the whole film is made up of that guys, minus Daniel Craig, who at that point gets the Bond boost and takes this movie to the next level. The movie's really good. It's got a great opening. It's got a fantastic beating sequence to a Duran Duran song, which frankly, there's a short list of movies that have a great beating to a Duran Duran song. This takes top of that list for me, and Ordinary World gets it every time. So with no further ado, I'm going to give you the opening, and this is from I love the song that plays over this. It's called Hailing by FC Kahuna. Wonderful electronic chill track. This is the very opening of Layer Cake tonight, 9 p.m. on 5-star.
He's a cracker. Here we go.
There were villains locked away for 12 years for robbing a bank of 10 grand. Doing time with drippy hippies who were doing 12 months for smuggling 2 million quid's worth of puff. I mean, work it out, mate. We're in the wrong game. Drugs changed everything. Always remember that one day all this drug monkey business will be legal. They won't leave it to people like me. Not when they finally figure out how much money there is to be made. Not millions. Billions.
Wow, great. I haven't seen that since it first came out, so I'm looking forward to that. Now, my recommendation is one that most people have seen. It's often studied at film school, I think. And I think you did a film debate.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure they may have talked about Nick Rogue's with Douglas as well, Donald Camel, his masterpiece.
Sick of the sight of it, Paul. Sick of the sight of it already.
Seriously. Don't Look Now is the film. It's called Judy Christie and Donald Sutherland. It's a very strange film. It gets under your skin, very unsettling. It's not quite a horror film. It's not quite a detective story. I don't quite know what it is, except it's this kind of a nightmare scenario. A couple lose their child, their daughter, who drowns, and they go to, for reasons best known to themselves, Venice, which the last time I checked is all water, apart from the odd building, and then they hear that the daughter is contacting a woman, very strange women, involved in sort of the occult, in having seances. And then the plot unravels, and the tension between the husband and wife gets even more intense, and the mutual blame. There's one very full-on for its time. It's 1973, this film, sex scene, and people at the time were saying, did they actually do the deed? I don't think they did, but it's still a very erotic scene. And it's just a kind of, I don't know what you call it, a haunting, nightmarish film with almost a trick ending. I'm not giving it, it's not an M. Night Shyamalan trick ending, but it's got a kind of, an odd ending that is also, in its way, as haunting as anything I think you'll ever see in the cinema.
I think it's one of those films that it stands out as a real auteur work. And we obviously, we've had a lot of reappraisal. We've had a lot of revisionist, bolstering for, Nick Rogue's work in the year or two since he passed. But this was always a banger.
Yeah.
This was always something, it felt unappreciated, I think. In the years pre-Rogue's death, it always felt kind of unappreciated, but generally acknowledged as one of the genre greats. It felt realistic, it felt gritty, and it really worked those horror creds, I thought.
This is the man who also gave us Performance, of course, and The Man Who Fell to Earth, as well as other films that weren't quite as successful. But this is on tonight, on BBC Two, 11:05. It's Don't Look Now from 1973.
I've seen your little girl, and she was laughing. Yes.
My sister's psychic.
She wants you to know. I've seen her, and she wants you to know that she's happy.
Christine. John, do you hear what I say? It was Christine.
My daughter is dead, Laura. She does not come peeping with messages back from behind the grave.
Yes.
Christine is dead.
Yes.
She is dead.
Yes.
Dead.
You get the flavour of it there, folks. Not the jolliest of watches, but an amazing film. And we've got your second recommendation now, Ben. I forgot how weird that trailer was as well. What is your film number 2 for this week, the Saturday movie?
So my film number 2, and this is the first of 2 movies, both at 9 p.m. One's on 6:35 somewhere tomorrow, but both on Paramount. And this is a film I absolutely love. They're both 2 films I absolutely love. The first is The Fugitive, which is Saturday night, 9 p.m. on Paramount. And this is, would you believe, the only movie ever to be based on a TV show, to be adapted from a TV show, and then go on to be nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. This thing went up against Schindler's List. That's how badass it was. It won Best Actor. Best Supporting Actor for Tommy Lee Jones as the antagonist. And it's an adaptation of the 60s TV series of the same name. It's The Fugitive, starring Harrison Ford, directed by Andrew Davis, who had just come off Under Siege. I think his previous hit had been Under Siege. It was on kind of a 90s mainstream popcorn action thriller kind of kick at that point. Harrison Ford is Richard Kimball, the Chicago surgeon who is framed for the murder of his wife, maintains he didn't do it, and finds himself sort of just happenstance through a prison break with the opportunity to flee for his life and clear his name. And Tommy Lee Jones is the U.S. Marshal tasked with hunting him down and bringing him in, even if he starts to suspect he may not actually be the guilty man he's being charged with bringing in. It is one of the great Hollywood thrillers. I maintain, I genuinely think it's one of the great Hollywood thrillers. It's probably the definitive, what we would call the Chicago thriller, because it really makes a spectacle of the city in which it takes place. I spent a lot of time in Chicago, and The Fugitive is a movie that you think of often when you're walking around. It's Harrison Ford at his action thriller peak. This is what the guy was born to do, and it's a perfect movie. It's just over 2 hours. It's a great thriller in its own right, but also it's a sort of cheeky adaptation of the formulaic nature of its TV series, the way they have the character just be a bit of a do-gooder, but almost offhandedly nods to the episodic nature of the series, and you still get the mythology, the great story arc that was parallel along. It's a banger. You must love this film, I'm sure. I
love the sequel as well, U.S. Marshals. I thought it was a great film. It was an underrated film. The Fugitive is fantastic, and the TV series bears watching. I think it was repeated a while ago, maybe on Talking Pictures TV, starring David Janssen, and that was the same. It was Kimball, wasn't it, is the doctor's name? He's accused of his wife's murder, and they constantly hear references to a one-armed man. I don't think the TV series ever resolved that whole conundrum. They certainly do in the film. It's one of Harrison Ford's, I think, most engaging performances, because he's ordinary and likeable in this one.
There is that. I mean, I have logic questions with it, like who the hell hires a one-armed man for an assassination? Like, it just seems like you're really not doing your job, right? You're a terrible.
He's one-armed. He's not armless.
At that stage. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he more or less is armless. That's the problem.
I do apologise.
But like I said, they didn't think their criminal conspiracy through. And do you know what? They didn't count on Tommy Lee Jones, and that's the clip I've got for you. It's the iconic trailer moment. Sidebar, Tommy Lee Jones really thought this wasn't going to go nowhere. This was a popcorn bit of fluff. And he famously told his co-star, you know, we really don't need to make so much effort. It's not like anyone's winning awards for this. He then won Best Supporting Actor. On which note, I give you Samuel Gerard, as played by Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive, Saturday night, 9 p.m. on Paramount. Please do enjoy.
Listen up, ladies and gentlemen. Our fugitive has been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven ground, barring injury, is 4 miles an hour. That gives us a radius of 6 miles. What I want out of each and every one of you is a hard target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, or doghouse in that area. Checkpoints go up to 15 miles. Your fugitive's name is Dr. Richard Kimball. Go get him.
Now, my second recommendation is a cracking film as far as I'm concerned. It's a kind of western set in a post-apocalyptic future, and there's so many of those knocking around, like Kevin Costner's The Postman. This is far better than those. It's called The Book of Eli. It stars Idris Elba. Gary Oldman's in it as well, so what's not to love? Directed by the Hughes brothers, who are probably best known for What Menace to Society, maybe. They also made From Hell with Johnny Depp, the Alan Moore comic book adaptation of the Jack the Ripper story, and Dead Presidents. And it's basically a lone, I won't say warrior, a lone pilgrim, you might say, is carrying something very precious, and people want to get their hands on it. Certainly Gary Oldman does, who's trying to start a kind of new civilization, new town, and he believes he can get hold of this book, the Book of Eli, from Denzel Washington. Then it'll become a mecca, this place. In the end, he doesn't get his way. Of course he doesn't. He's the bad guy, but he's brilliant in this. It's another facet of his bad guy kind of pantheon of characters he's got. This is one of my favourite films of Denzel Washington, because again, he's someone. I said this, that in The Fugitive, Harrison Ford is sympathetic. In this, at times, he's very unsympathetic, I think, Denzel Washington. There's a brilliant, not exactly twist, I'd say revelation near the end. The revelation is an appropriate word, because it's very biblical, this as well. It's about saving fragments of a previous civilization. Some of the fighting in this is fantastic, and it's really and there's a sense in which maybe, I'm not sure if it was preceding the first one, I wonder whether this was almost like a test piece, an audition piece for his action role in The Equalizer. It's a great film, this, though, and I do like a science fiction film that isn't afraid to be a little bit kind of out there. And it's certainly that at times, isn't it, Van?
Yeah, it kind of fits halfway between the Equalizer series and like Mad Max. And obviously I think this is five years before we get Fury Road. Like Mad Max was long dead and buried, but this is a part of the post-apocalyptic way we had with The Road. I think The Road is is a year later. I think the adaptation of The Road. Yeah, we've talked about The Road before, and I think you had The Road and Book of Eli at the same time, which seems to be this sort of American push to try and kind of reclaim a bit of that Mad Max sci-fi territory.
It certainly works in this film. It's on Film 4 tomorrow night, 9 p.m, followed by another good film, more of a horror film. Midsummer is on straight afterwards on Film 4, which is a kind of Scandi type or European, another take on the Wicker Man type saga. Book of Eli, though, great film. Denzel Washington, Gary Oldman, and here's a chunk of the trailer.
30 winters ago, the war tore a hole in the sky. Only a few survived. Our only hope is in my hands. Take off the pack, nice and slow. Put that hand on me again, you won't get it back. Cursed be the ground for our sake. For out of the ground we were taken, and to the dust we shall return. I told you you weren't going to get that back. This little town, just the beginning.
All we need is that book.
He's different than the others. You're not going to be able to make him do what you want him to do.
This is your last chance. Give it up or I swear I'll bury you.
I don't want any trouble.
That's too bad.
Nobody touches it but me, you understand me?
don't want any trouble. It is a Western, isn't it? No two ways about it. And my final recommendation is a Sunday film.
Oh, yeah.
Sunday afternoon. Again, it's a cracker. You may well have seen it because it's one of the biggest grossing films. Hit $1 billion, this animated film, in 2016. It's called, depends which territory you watch it in. It's called either Zootopia, Zootropolis, as it was here, I think, or Zoomania, as it was in some territories. And basically, it's a world where, yes, mammals are kind of the apex species, and we run the cities, built the cities, drive the motor cars, whatever, but we're not human beings. There are no human beings, and all animals have evolved to be sort of human beings. Same characteristics. They wear clothes. Very funny film, brilliant animation, and there's a great kind of detective story in it as well. So it's got elements of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but not the live-action mix. Made a lot of money. Idris Elba's involved in the cast. Jason Bateman, also Shakira and J.K. Simmons. I say it even got an Oscar, I think, for the 89th Oscars. It got the best animated film, and a sequel's on the way. I absolutely love this movie. 1:40 Sunday afternoon. It's a family affair.
In the world of Zootopia, humans never happened, which makes Zootopia a modern, civilized world that is entirely animal. That is an animal. Animals in Zootopia are anthropomorphic. That is just a big fancy word that means they walk around on 2 feet. They do not go to work nude. Thank you. Almost. That's got it. And they use technology. Okay, there are mammals from all over the globe in Zootopia. Large and small, fast and slow. But the truth is, Zootopia isn't perfect. And just like our world, not everyone gets along. Especially natural enemies.
And some of the, should we say, more predatory animals start to disappear, and that's the heart of the matter. And all that says Zootopia there is in our listings as Zootropolis. And what's your final film for us this week, Van?
Well, before I get to mine, I just want to say I'm devastated, Mr. Ross. You managed to talk about Zootropolis for an entire minute, and even mention Shakira, and not talk about the banger that was Shakira's "Try Everything," the great single that powers. Honestly, that thing is that slams. That song absolutely slams. So I'm going to talk about Stargate.
Okay, we might dig out a burst of Shakira though for the end of our conversation. But Stargate, what a film this is.
Exactly. One of my favourite movies ever. This is on Sunday night on Paramount at 6:35 p.m. I think this is one of the greats, genuinely one of the greats, and also the perfect example of how a movie can exist on its own, and then should you just want to see more, there's about 15 years worth of really great television that you can enjoy on the back of it, courtesy of Stargate SG-1, Atlantis Universe, etc. But the movie from 1994, Roland Emmerich's second English language film, stars Kurt Russell and James Spader as an Air Force colonel and an Egyptologist who are the exploratory mission sent through an ancient Egyptian portal of the gods that sends them to another universe in which the ancient aliens theory turns out to be real. And the gods of, times gone by turn out to be, actual aliens, and their magic is just alien powers. And it's left to the US Air Force and, let's say, a begrudging Egyptologist to save not only an alien world, but ours as well. I've got a clip for you of James Spader translating the text that explains exactly what was going on in the mythology of this. It's a cracker. I'd imagine because you must have gotten to enjoy this so much more. I was 11 when this came out, and I wish I could have enjoyed the sort of fervour for this a bit more. It's one of my, coming of age classics. Did you get to enjoy the hype for this? I know you were doing film at the time.
I did, actually, and what was intriguing about it was they didn't quite know how to market it, I think. So it was marketed slightly as a sort of gung-ho Independence Day type film, although it's much more than that. And also James Spader, by then, the kind of lustre had faded a bit from his kind of Brat Pack stardom. So but it's just a great film, this, isn't it? A great thought-provoking kind of, this bears endless rewatch. I must have seen this film 20 times over the years. It's a cracker.
It is, and like you say about James Spader, this is like one of the only times James Spader played a good guy, because he was known for kind of like creepy, psychosexual, very much for the adult dramas at this point. So him playing the Egyptologist and a sci-fi actioner is kind of rare, but I'll pass you over to him. This is Stargate. It's on Paramount Sunday afternoon, 6:35. It's a really good one. Great all around Indiana Jones with a bit more of a sci-fi bent. Worth a watch. Enjoy with the whole fam. I'll give you Stargate.
Here we go.
Ra took him and possessed his body like some kind of a parasite looking for a host. And inhabiting this human form, He appointed himself ruler. He used the Stargate to bring thousands of people here to this planet as workers for the mines, just like the one we saw. This mineral is clearly the building block of all his technology. With this, he can sustain eternal life. Now, something happened, where is it, back on Earth? A rebellion or uprising, and the Stargate was buried there. Fearful of a rebellion here, Ra outlawed reading and writing. He didn't want the people to remember the truth.
The truth. Huge thanks to Van Con, of course, whose podcast Off Screen drops about 8 o'clock this morning. Always well worth a listen. And always worth catching Van with me, Paul Ross, each and every Friday with our Freeview film recommendations. But for the moment, friends, that's a wrap. Cheers, Van.